Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine. Thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Marco.
Sean.
I like to go fast.
You can't.
Fast? You can't? No.
Speed limit is 0. Try to go 0.
To run zero. No, I'm joking. There's a there's a lot of zero marketing messaging out there in the context of trust, and I think what we're going to talk about today is how do you know who you can trust and how to trust them and why trust them and where to trust them and how to enable the business with trust if you can't see what's going on in the first place. And I don't know anything about this topic, thankfully, but we do have somebody who does know. That's Huxley Barbee from RunZero. Huxley, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me both. It's looking forward to this conversation here.
Absolutely.
Really cool. And just an heads up for people watching the video, that you can see we're all black and white. And for those listening, you're just gonna have to trust us. We're all in black and white. We're from the past, but we talk about the future. That's the funny part.
Yeah, very monochromatic.
Yeah, exactly.
A monochromatic future. You want to start with that? Do you see the future being monochromatic?
With a hint of color.
Everybody's homogenizing in some ways, I feel like. So
true. Absolutely.
Very profound. Very profound.
All right. So before we get into the core of the conversation, Huxley, a few words about who you are, maybe your journey into the world of InfoSec and your role at RunZero.
Journey into the world of InfoSec. Well, when I majored in undergrad, I majored in Asian languages. And so I came out of college with no marketable skills aside from technology, which was a hobby. So that was my entry into technology because there was nothing else I could really do. And lo and behold, I'm still here after decades of working in IT and security. But at RunZero, my company, I'm the security evangelist.
Exactly. And while maybe national languages, well, they do have a role in technology and security for sure, but language in general and the ability to communicate and translate things from one thing to another is super important in this industry. So I suspect you lean on that skill set in some way as you help tell the RunZero story to prospects and customers and partners and the like.
More so now than before. There was a time when I was a software engineer, hands-on keyboard all day long. Yes, but now more so, given that I'm having these conversations with the industry at large, it is more important.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think you just made a case for anybody from any background is actually needed in this industry. You never know where you start, but you know you may end up in cybersecurity for a reason or another. So I think that's a pretty big topic right there too, although I know we're not here to talk about that. But I guess as an ambassador, as somebody that represents a company, you know, the touch of what the industry has become nowadays, I think it's quite important for sure.
Yeah, so let's go back to black and white times. Probably not that far back, but RunZero, give us a little background on the forming of the company, what the initial objective was, any initial goals or milestones that the founders wanted to achieve the company, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. So the founders of the company are H.G. Moore and Chris Kirsch, and they are both folks who have been steeped in offensive security for quite some time. H.G. Moore, obviously author of Metasploit. Chris Kirsch is the Black Badge winner, a DEF CON Black Badge winner of the social engineering contest from years back. And so they have, both in their hobby of cybersecurity as well as in their jobs, met with a lot of customers, understood the challenges for a lot of customers. And one of the things that they saw again and again was that most customers didn't know what they had on their network. So that's one really key important thing. The other thing that they realized is that more and more security teams were no longer being asked to just protect the managed IT devices in the corporate environment, in the office, essentially. That over the last 20 years, the security teams have been asked to start protecting IoT devices, OT devices, and a multitude of environments, not just the office, but also in the cloud, in remote employees' homes, in targets of mergers and acquisitions, in the factory, and so on and so forth. So that scope for security teams have drastically expanded. But at the same time, the tools that security teams had for going out there and figuring out what is on the network, which were sort of okay 20 years ago when you're just dealing with the office, were entirely unsuitable for this day and age. And related to this whole divergence of environments and diaspora of devices, they also noticed this decentralization of control, right? So for example, in the cloud, developers are spinning up machines left and right without any sort of proper governance, right? And oftentimes these EC2 instances or Lambdas, they're sort of instantiated, but then never decommissioned, right? Leaving this open hole for attackers. So H.G. and Chris looked at this situation and said, well, there has to be a better way. There needs to be new tooling to deal with the new reality. And that's how they came up with RunZero, which is a cyber asset management solution.
And when we talk about discovering assets, and I mean, I can look back to days when I was managing an ESM product, GRC product for a big company, and a big part of it was asset identification, and it collected a ton of stuff, and it can be used for a ton of things. And one of the ways that we were able to kind of connect it with the users was to find those use cases where this information can be used to make decisions, drive actions, reduce workflow overhead, reduce team burnout, whatever the cases may be. So I'm wondering how some of the initial use cases looked, especially as you talk about IoT and OT. Those devices shed different types of information that maybe some teams understand, other teams don't. I don't know, I'm kind of all over the place here, but the connection of IT and OT, where those things cross over. So maybe a few scenarios where the information helps to provide some insight into the team or teams that need to do something with it.
Yeah, and oftentimes for customers, the ones that are a little bit more mature, having a full asset inventory is an end in and of itself, right? And having that full asset inventory is actually far more difficult than the folks who haven't never even tried to, or never even attempted to get that full asset inventory. It's easy to figure out what are all the managed IT devices on your network. It's the unknowns that really are problematic. These are the ones that are probably have been orphaned. They have not been patched. They have no governance whatsoever, and they've been forgotten about. And it just so happens these are also the same ones that have an outsized implication for your security posture, right? Because attackers are not going to go for the managed IT device that's up to date on its patches and has EDR on it. No, they're going to go for the one that's like been sitting there for like the last 5 years. People have forgotten about it, or people know it's there, but they're afraid to breathe on it because nobody knows what it's for, and they're afraid of it restarting, causing some sort of outage. So that in of itself is important for more mature organizations. But as you've alluded to, for many organizations, it's about what else you can do with asset inventory that's important. One particular use case that we see quite a bit is understanding the gaps in your security controls coverage. So for example, what are my devices that are missing EDR? And you can't really answer that question unless you have an approach that brings together a full asset inventory plus information from your EDR of choice, right? So find endpoints missing CrowdStrike, find endpoints missing SentinelOne, find endpoints missing, AVG, for example. That is a major use case that is popular with RunZero's customers. Another one would be trying to be better about 0 days, right? Obviously, there are vuln scanners out there, and they play a very important role in helping a company mitigate any sort of potential problem. But the fact of the matter is, usually when there's a 0 day, it takes time for the information to be released through the NVD, and it takes time for vuln scanners to release a new vuln check. And even if a vuln check exists, the customer then has to rescan the entire network. And oftentimes they're not even rescanning the whole network. They're just rescanning part of the network that they're allowed to, right? Because vuln scanning has troubles of its own. One really unique and novel way that customers use this full asset inventory is to identify devices that are potentially vulnerable to a new 0 day, right? So rather than doing a full vuln check, you're able to use certain heuristics or other sort of attributes that are like telltale signs that this particular device probably has this vulnerability, and use that to help you scope out a punch list of what to go after in order to deal with the 0 day, like right on day one.
And talk to me about the process of gathering this information, because you mentioned bad actors having access to SCADA systems, IoT devices, default passwords for those things, ports and API calls that can be used against. And a lot of that stuff is open source intelligence, OSINT on Shodan and other places. Mm-hmm. So there's that kind of data. And then there's deeper, like you said, inside, perhaps, is it running an EDR or not? Mm-hmm. How deep and wide can you get without like destroying the network? Because you're kind of going after the device to say, give me all that you can give me.
Yes.
But sometimes that actually triggers a response from the device that's not acceptable, like shutting it down or blocking a port or whatever the case may be. So how do you know what's important? How do you know about how to get it in a safe manner?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is 100% a concern. And this is one of the reasons why security teams have to pick a time of the night in order to run a vuln scan, or manage these really large exclusion lists of IP blocks and not look at it all. And you'll find that this is more necessary in OT environments as well as with IoT devices. It's less of an issue with managed IT, but still an issue, of course. But with OT devices, some of which have been sitting there for like 20, 30, even 50 years, like you really have to be very careful in terms of what you're doing with scanning. So there's a lot going on here. And one of the reasons why historically scanners have not done well with these devices that are prone to disruption is because they intentionally send non-standard packets. And it's a tactic that's used by these older legacy scanners to elicit a certain type of response from the operating system of that target device in order to make a determination as to what it is, right? It's a fingerprinting technique of sending a non-standard packet just to see how the response is, right? The behavior of that device, and then say, it must be this type of device because of the response. That's something you absolutely should not do if you want to have that breadth of coverage with devices. Another thing to do is to make sure that you're fingerprinting incrementally. So a lot of legacy scanners, I'm thinking MMAP, Nessus, as well as the major vuln scanners, what they'll do is they will query a device and grab all the information at once. This, of course, also can cause a disruption in the device because it might have an older TCP/IP stack, or it might have a custom software, or it might just be like under-resourced, which causes it to freeze up or restart based on that sort of like in-depth query all at once. Really what you want to do is what we call incremental fingerprinting, where you send at first a super benign query just to get some sense of what this might be like, around the edges. And then based on the response is you iteratively go deeper and deeper with the queries to gather more information about it. And so in so doing, hey, I can send this type of packet, but not that type of packet. I can make this type of query and not that type of query in order to avoid some sort of major outage with that device that you're trying to scan. But you're right. It is a touchy thing. You have to be very careful when you're doing active scanning, especially in OT environments and with IoT devices.
And as you're talking about this, I want to start looking at things a little bit from the business side, right? I mean, for me, if I were the business in charge and you tell me this thing, or like, we come in, but we don't break stuff. Okay, that's cool. That could be my main fear. Like, not only you want to do it at night, but also I really don't want to deal with that disruption. Then you can start thinking like, well, why do you have a 25 years old device or whatever it is? But the point is there. So tell me about some either case study, or what is your typical kind of client for RunZero, and how does it go the first conversation with them? Like, are they already looking for what you're offering, or is something that is, oh, I didn't know we could do this the way you do it. That sounds good to me.
I would say most people agree in the importance of asset inventory. Everybody knows that you cannot protect what you don't know about. Like, that's sort of a truism, sort of accepted. I think the biggest shift in mindset is realizing that existing asset discovery tools don't quite cut it. They are either they're optimized for managed IT devices, or they do asset discovery in such a way that they only gather a minimal amount of information, which leads to misidentification, like bad fingerprinting, essentially. So at the end of the day, you end up in a situation where your asset inventory just isn't really covering everything that you need. And it is exactly the stuff that it's not covering, which is where you're most vulnerable. It is those unknowns on the network that you're not going to be inventorying, that you're not going to be able to discover. And it just so happens those are the same ones that are going to be most susceptible to attack and get you into the most trouble, right? A lot of this comes back to this idea that when you do asset discovery, you should be taking an approach through the lens of the attacker. In fact, very important point here, asset discovery and recon are two sides of the same coin. It's really the exact same thing. It just depends on what your perspective is. If you're an attacker, yeah, you call it recon. If you're a defender, you call it asset inventory. But it's all really the same thing. And what you're trying to do is figure out where you have problems. You start with visibility. You start with figuring out what everything is. And then the next step is figuring out what are all the bad things? Where do I have to prioritize?
How important is it to, and I'm thinking from the business perspective here as well, because if you have the information, you're hopefully going to use it to make some decisions and drive some actions. And as we all know, there's no lack of security data in one form or another coming at the team from all angles, all times of the day, and it's all marked red high, right?
Yep.
You got to take care of this. So how does what you provide help teams perhaps prioritize where to focus? What's important to the business?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a variety of ways that good asset inventory, full asset inventory, can help you prioritize where the security team should focus. So let's imagine there's either a vulnerability or a misconfiguration on a device. Okay. Yes, there are tools these days that can tell you, oh, the CVSS score is such and such, right? But the thing is, nearly or severity. But the thing is, with more than half of vulnerabilities being marked as high or critical, like it doesn't really help with prioritization. So you want to start looking at other things around that asset to help you make a determination as to whether or not that weakness, that misconfiguration vulnerability, is something you should really look into right away. One thing to look at is, hey, is this device externally facing? If this has a public IP, then clearly that's something that is more likely going to get you in trouble than something else. Like if I have RDP running on a device that's completely isolated internally, okay, might be something you want to look at, but it might be okay. But if it's RDP running on a device that has a public IP address, you should really take a look at that as quickly as you can, right? And understand why that's there and if it actually has to be there. So location within the network, very important. Another detail that comes from asset inventory that can really help is, what is the function of this device, right? If this device is a printer, then okay, and has a vulnerability or a misconfiguration, good to know, but probably very little damage that an attacker can do. But if this were an IP camera where they can start looking at the facilities, then that might be something that's worth looking at. So understanding these asset details, whether that be what is the hardware or what is who's the owner of this, who's the business owner of this, understanding the business context of that device, could potentially be very, very helpful, along with network location, very helpful in helping security teams determine where they should prioritize.
I'm going to go back to the business because I'm not the tech guy, so I'm always going to bring you back to the business. So tell me, who is your typical client? I mean, I know you have many. I mean, do you work more with an industry than another? What kind of maturity company you normally work for? And if somebody's listening now, how is it going to tell, like, I'm going to go and talk to RunZero because I know I'm going to go and work well with them?
Yeah, I would say, well, the fact is we have customers in every single industry. Like there is not one that can't use asset inventory. It is such a foundational component to a security program that you couldn't really mount a credible defense without having it. Now, with that being said, of course, some customers have an easier time coming up with a full asset inventory, right? So if you are a company that is just born in the cloud and you're just using a single cloud, right? You're just AWS, and you have a handful of AWS accounts or less, then you probably don't need a scanning solution. You could probably just get away with using the AWS console or using some sort of cloud-like solution for something like that. But if you are the type of organization that has multiple clouds, where you need consolidation across all of your cloud environments, or you have lots of on-premise environments, there's definitely room for you to take a look at different asset discovery solutions to understand like what might be best for you. We see a lot of interest, obviously, in manufacturing and retail and education, right? Education being, like, for example, like really federated environments. But we also see interest in like healthcare and oil and gas and things like this, as well as finance. So lots of different industries need asset inventory. About the only one where they don't need a full-on scanning plus API integration solution would probably be some sort of single cloud, born in the cloud type of company.
So talk to me a little bit more about the environment, because you mentioned multi-cloud I don't know if cloud sovereignty, data sovereignty, and where the clouds are in different countries, if that plays a role. Containers plays a role. If there are VMs obviously within there. I don't know if you get into some of the what's running on it in terms of apps. What are some of the nuances that maybe some organizations might think they have asset inventory covered, where in fact they're missing key elements because of these changes in networking infrastructure and device composition, I guess, if I can call it that change the way they should be looking at things. Where are they kind of missing the mark, do you think?
Yeah. So, there are multiple dimensions to measure whether or not your asset inventory is full. One is by device type, right? So are you getting all of IT, IoT, and OT? One is environments. Are you getting devices that are disconnected from your network because they're your remote employees' homes? Or are they in the cloud, right? So that's another dimension. Another dimension is sort of like the depth of detail. So when we talk about cyber assets, which is distinct from IT assets, and I'll explain that in a moment, but a cyber asset is a compute device plus all the related information that security teams care about. So this means not just hardware, but also software that's on that device and the services that are listening on that device. What are all the misconfigurations and vulnerabilities that are on that device? Who are the users associated with that device? And things like this. And this is very different from an IT asset, because to analogize over, right, an IT asset is a compute device plus all the information that IT teams care about. IT teams will care about replacement cost or licensing. This could be important to security teams, but it's not as important. So we don't consider that to be part of a cyber asset. But nevertheless, we see a lot of security teams taking IT assets from an IT asset management solution and then trying to use them for security purposes where they have replacement costs, which is useless to them, but is missing vulnerabilities or missing, like, these are the listening services on that machine, which they would care about, but it doesn't have it. And so they're hampered by having that lack of depth in their asset inventory. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. The tools that were okay 20 years ago for just the office are not really suited for the realities of today. And what you really need is a cyber asset management solution to help you along.
Yeah. And let me ask this question first. Do you also collect the IT asset information at RunZero?
So,
or do you purposefully stick to security stuff?
Well, I mean, the replacement cost, that's something that comes outside of scan. You can't scan for that information as far as I know. But there's definitely some interplay between a cyber asset and an IT asset, of course. You can use one to sort of feed into the other one.
Right? Because the reason I asked that, it goes back to my scenario. Now, this is going to date me, Y2K, where security company trying to help organizations kind of cross that mark over the new year time frame. And I talk about this on my show, Redefining Cybersecurity, all the time, where security information and IT information can actually drive better business decisions. So we're not back on our heels all the time trying to patch stuff, where in fact, if a machine is full on hard disk space and has a bad network card that keeps failing and other things that are IT related, and also is constantly in patch mode because that the OS sucks or the applications on it have issues, that's a problem machine, right? That maybe the business might want to look at changing out. So I guess the question is, maybe that doesn't directly apply, but is there a role for RunZero to help the broader business make some really strong decisions?
Yeah, so two comments here. First one on Y2K. Y2K was one of my earlier projects when I was a consultant back in the day. So yeah, I was right there with you. And so yeah, absolutely. We definitely do have customers who take this cyber asset inventory and then use that to feed into their CMDB in order to make sure that those IT workflows are operating on all the devices. You know, we haven't even talked about this, but many of the IT asset discovery tools also are not fit for purpose for the realities of today. And they also are missing those IoT devices and OT devices, those unmanaged IT devices that they need to know about for other reasons, right? For operational efficiency. And, you know, one of the side use cases for having a really good asset inventory, even though it's a cyber asset inventory, is to then feed into the ITS inventory, into the CMDB of some sort, with its wealth of detail. And of course, then IT could use that to go do something else with it. And of course, that certainly does help the business make decisions in terms of performance and efficiency and so on and so forth. I think a second thing that's worth noting about this sort of interplay between IT and security and how it's better to collaborate. Fact of the matter is, security teams do not own those devices. There was one survey recently where it said something like more than 60% of security teams need to work with other groups in order to actually remediate any security problems. Or to put another way, security teams are often begging and pleading and cajoling all these other groups within the organization to please patch the damn thing or take it down or whatever, right? So it's always better when the two are playing well together. Security is necessarily a collaborative discipline, and if there can be an agreement on authoritative data, right, source of truth, if you will, things just go better. And having a full cyber asset inventory where the asset ownership of as many devices as possible is known also reduces remediation time, right? So rather than security teams having to go figure out who owns this damn thing, because the person that we see over here listed for this asset left the company 10 years ago. So now who owns it? Who can I talk to about what this is? What the hell does it do? Does anybody seem to know? And having to track down who the owner is, reducing that time really helps with reducing your mean time to respond. So it really helps the company in multiple ways to have a full asset inventory that is also potentially feeding into a fuller IT asset inventory.
Wow. So
truth, trust, back to the trust.
Trust. I want to challenge this. So early at the beginning, you said, you know, trust. And of course, the name of the company is RunZero. Right. I want to say unequivocally, RunZero is not a zero trust company. When we say zero, we don't mean zero trust, right? When we say zero, we just mean there's zero unknowns on your network in terms of assets. But we're not here to jump on the zero trust bandwagon for the VC money or anything like that. Yeah. That is still very much a trend.
That's why I was playing on that a bit.
Yeah. We are not that. I want to say that, be very clear about that.
You should put that. Zeros doesn't stand for that zero. It's another zero.
Like a new tagline. Yeah.
Right.
The other zero.
The other zero. Yeah. The other dimension. So I like to end this kind of conversation always looking into the future, and you know, you guys dated yourself with the Y2K. I could say I was there during the French Revolution, but that really dates me. So we'll just move into the future instead of that. Where do you see things going here? Like, I'm just gonna get, for example, a quote that I found here on the website that says, "RunZero is the bomb for home and for work/corporate." I'm not gonna read who said that, but it's a big company. And so there is an entire new dimension, but there's also an entire different set of tools and technology that we have nowadays. You know, you talked a lot, and Sean mentioned, you know, 20 years ago, you probably couldn't even do what you guys are doing now. So kind of curious to put your futuristic hat on and see where do you see this industry moving, especially for what you do, like how technology is coming in, AI. I mean, feel free to drop a few technology there. You know, just curious. I mean, an honest question to what you see.
Every conversation I have, somehow ChatGPT comes up.
Just AI. I'm going to
Yeah. All right. Well, I think the important thing, and this I think I have very high confidence in, this problem is not going to get any better on its own. The surface that you present to attackers, which they may take advantage of in order to infiltrate into your company and move laterally through your company, and that's not going to get any better. There are going to be more and more assets that you have to deal with, especially the ones where they're being instantiated without proper governance. So that is something that you can take to the bank. I feel like that's not going to change. That is coming. It's just going to get worse, and you have to find a way to deal with it. Otherwise, you're always going to be on the back foot. Your security program is always going to be reactive because you just don't know what you have. And so every day is a new unhappy surprise for your security team.
So it's cleaning up, kind of like a rule of thumb, instead of having so much. Maybe in the future, be a little bit more minimalist in the assets that you have, or it's just like not the way that business. Yeah, it's not the way business is gonna go.
No, that's not going to happen. There's always going to be new ideas, new offerings for companies, and there's the number of software engineers is always increasing. I don't care if there's AI writing code these days. There's always going to be more software engineers building more applications and more services. And they're going to be pushing the envelope of what the security team has to deal with. So you better deal with it, because otherwise it's just going to get away from you.
Yeah. The nerd in me wants to talk for hours. I'm just thinking of all these use cases. Like you talk about, old stuff's not going to go away, new stuff's going to come. And then in the middle, there are migrations from old to new. From on-premises to the cloud, and renting devices or leasing tractors, right, that are on our network, and all this stuff where we can control some things, but we still need to know what's going on and help guide others that have the control and the ownership. And I think you nailed it for me in the single source of truth. So having visibility into that, being able to, back to your language degree, being able to translate that and communicate that back to the business and the players in the business, but be it directly or through partnerships, to say, this is where we stand from a cyber perspective. Here's how it plays in from an IT and OT and IoT perspective. And hopefully we can make some better decisions as a business because we have this visibility from a single source of truth. So I love it. Well, I always say one more question, but Marco will bash me over the head if I do that. So maybe we can have another chat and get into. I'd like to talk operations and team structure and workflows and all this stuff. So who knows? Maybe there's another chat down the road for some of those things. But
I would love to come back. Absolutely.
Yes, and maybe there's a place I'll see you in New York coming.
Yes,
up soon.
Absolutely. So aside from being the security evangelist at RunZero, I'm also the lead organizer for B-Sides NYC. And B-Sides NYC is on, after a 5-year hiatus, we are on for April 22nd, 2023. Tickets are on sale now. It's only $15.
Sweet.
Only $15 for the conference. And if you are a student, you automatically get a refund after the conference.
Look at that. I'm going to become a student for the day. Look at that. I think I'm always learning something. I learned a ton today.
You're always a student.
I am a student. Well, we'll put a link into B-Sides NYC so folks can check out the event and hopefully meet you there, Huxley. And thanks for helping to put that on after a 5-year hiatus. I actually will be in California heading to RSA before that. So I won't be able to visit you live in person in New York, sadly, but hopefully many who are on the East Coast can do that, and others as well. Any theme or any highlights that are important for folks for that?
Oh, at B-Sides, no, it runs the gamut. We have red team talks, blue team talks, other colors of the InfoSec wheel talks. We got workshops, villages. It's full security conference.
Full on B-Sides. Love it.
That's right.
in the spirit that it was created. All right. Well, Huxley, thanks so much for bringing this story to us. Great to learn more about RunZero, and great to meet you as the evangelist and spokesperson for this. I think we have some good tips in here for folks looking at their inventory and their assets, inventory assets. So we'll include links to your site and other information you think folks would want to access to help them learn more. And thanks again. Thanks everybody for listening to this story here on ITSP Magazine.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, share ITSP Magazine with your friends, family, and colleagues. Thank you for listening.